The hyperspace tunnel collapsed. What should have been a routine flight through the outer rim became something else entirely, a dimensional rupture that neither Jedi sensors nor Republic instruments had a name for. The Nebuchadnezzar, that ancient human vessel with its weathered hull and jury-rigged systems, wasn't designed for whatever this was. Morpheus had been monitoring the ship's systems when the cascade started, watching readouts spike and cascade into chaos. Trinity was running calculations that made no sense. And Neo, standing at the observation viewport with his hands braced against reinforced transparasteel, felt it before anyone else understood it was happening. The code shifted. That's the only way he could describe it. Throughout his entire existence in and out of the Matrix, Neo had learned to perceive the underlying structure of reality. He'd felt it the moment he truly believed, that instant when the chains came off and he could see the world not as it appeared, but as it was. Patterns, sequences, the fundamental language underneath everything. Here, now, as the hyperspace tunnel splintered around them, he felt that same sensation multiply tenfold. The rules weren't glitching, they were fragmenting. "Rig for impact," Morpheus's voice cut through the alarm klaxons. But Neo was already moving. Time did what it always did for him. It slowed. Not completely, never completely, but enough. His perception accelerated beyond normal human limits, his consciousness stretching across microseconds like they were minutes. He saw the spatial anomaly spreading through the viewport, a wound in the fabric of space itself. He could trace its pattern, understand its trajectory. In that bullet-time clarity, Neo moved with impossible grace, securing loose equipment even as the ship heaved. His hands moved faster than human reflexes should allow. He reached for Trinity, pulling her into the safety harness a full second before the worst of the turbulence hit. The rift consumed the Nebuchadnezzar. Light, not the cold blue of hyperspace, but something warmer, stranger, flooded through every viewport. Neo felt it in his chest, a pressure that wasn't quite pain. It was like diving into code itself, like being unmade and remade simultaneously. His enhanced perceptions didn't help here. The patterns were too vast, too intricate, operating on scales he'd never encountered. For the first time since his awakening, Neo experienced genuine disorientation. The world, or whatever passed for it now, spun, then nothing. When consciousness returned, it came without preamble. Neo's eyes snapped open. No gradual emergence from darkness, no slow reorientation, just awareness, sudden and complete. He was falling. The sky above was wrong. A massive vertical metropolis stretching impossibly upward, towers ascending into clouds that shouldn't exist on a world with this atmospheric density. Below him, a lower cityscape sprawled in a maze of catwalks, speeders, and industrial structures belching steam and smoke. The Nebuchadnezzar was gone. His crew was gone. And he was descending through layers of a city that felt like it went down forever. Neo's bullet-time reflex engaged without conscious thought. The world crystallized into slow-motion clarity. He could see individual raindrops hanging suspended mid-fall, could count the speeding transports that would have collided with him a heartbeat after he arrived. His mind calculated vectors, trajectories, exit points. He twisted mid-air, his body responding with preternatural grace, and reached for a landing strut extending from a passing cargo freighter. His fingers closed on magnetized durasteel. The impact should have shattered bone. Instead, Neo absorbed the collision with fluid precision, swinging himself onto the freighter's hull and riding it as it descended deeper into the layered city. The air grew thicker, the light dimmer, the architecture older and more corroded. This was a place where sunlight barely reached, a lower level, where society's refuse accumulated. The freighter decelerated as it approached a docking platform. Neo detached himself from the hull and dropped silently onto the platform's edge, his landing producing barely a whisper of sound despite the fall distance that would have been fatal for any normal human. He straightened, taking in his surroundings with the comprehensive awareness that had made him legendary in the Matrix. Coruscant's Undercity. That's what the city was called. He picked the thought from a nearby vendor's conscious emanation, surprised at how easily he could sense surface thoughts here. This place thrummed with a presence he'd never encountered before. Not like the Matrix's digital pulse. This was organic, alive, distributed across billions of minds like a network without servers. It felt like code, but warm code. Living code. A patrol of white-armored soldiers rounded the corner ahead, moving with military precision. Neo watched them with analytical detachment. Clone troopers. He extracted the designation from a data stream that seemed to exist just below the surface of perception. Identical soldiers, an army of duplicates. In that moment, Neo understood something fundamental. This galaxy had its own prison, its own rules, its own users and the used. The troopers hadn't seen him yet. Neo moved, not running, not quite, but moving with speed that would have seemed impossible if anyone had been watching closely enough to track it. He transitioned from the platform into the shadowed maintenance tunnels beneath the street level, leaving the clone patrol behind without incident. As he moved through the Undercity, absorbing the layered sights and sounds and the strange omnipresent sensation of that living code underneath everything, Neo began to understand. He wasn't in the Matrix anymore, but he wasn't free either. On Coruscant's highest levels, in the Jedi Temple's council chamber, Master Yoda's ancient eyes opened suddenly. The other 10 council members felt it too, a tremor in the force so profound that the meditation pools themselves rippled. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't Sith manipulation. It was something else. Something that shouldn't exist. What was that? Ki-Adi-Mundi asked, his elongated head turning toward Yoda. Disturbance in the Force, yes, Yoda said slowly, his three-fingered hand gripping his staff. But understand it, I do not. Born of this galaxy, it was not. Presence of great power, yet alien. Familiar, somehow, yet unknown. Master Windu leaned forward. The Separatists? No. Yoda's ears drooped slightly. Answer to that, we do not have, but answer we shall find. Send scouts, we must. Find the source of this disturbance, and quickly. In the darkness of Coruscant's Undercity, Neo walked deeper into the maze of his new reality, completely unaware that the most powerful Force users in the galaxy had just noticed his existence. He didn't know yet that his arrival had rewritten the rules. He didn't understand that to some, he would be a weapon. To others, a threat. To a few, an answer to a question they hadn't dared to ask. All he knew was what he'd always known. There was a world beneath the surface, and he'd been given a chance to see it. Now he had to decide what to do with that sight. The game had begun anew. The Undercity of Coruscant existed in perpetual twilight. Massive support pillars descended from the levels above, like stone giants, and between them sprawled an ecosystem of criminality that had thrived in darkness for centuries. Spice dealers, slavers, information brokers, and mercenaries moved through the corridors with the practiced ease of those who understood that this was their domain. The higher levels belonged to senators and philosophers and Jedi. Down here, power meant something more immediate: a blaster, a strong arm, and the willingness to use both. Neo moved through this underworld with the same preternatural grace that had defined him in the Matrix. But here, surrounded by alien species and incomprehensible technology, his advantages felt less total. In the digital world, he'd understood the rules completely, understood them so thoroughly he could bend them. Here, he was reading a language he'd never studied, perceiving patterns in something called the Force that had no equivalent in his previous existence. The sensation was both exhilarating and unsettling. He'd learned quickly that the information network of Coruscant's lower levels ran through the cantinas and black market datapads. Neo found himself in the Obsidian Promenade, a sprawling bar where the air hung thick with smoke from a dozen alien drug varieties, and the music pounded with a rhythm that made human teeth ache. A Twi'lek information broker named Vex sat in a corner booth, his leku twitching occasionally as he processed multiple conversations simultaneously through an array of comm devices. Neo approached slowly. Reading the tension in the booth, 2 Rhodian enforcers, a protocol droid serving drinks, and a Zabrak male with the sharp eyes of a hunter. But that wasn't what caught Neo's attention. It was the old human woman at the bar, hunched over a drink, with cybernetic implants running down the left side of her face. She watched him with an intensity that transcended normal perception. As Neo's gaze met hers, he felt something shift, a resonance, like 2 tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency. She'd felt him arrive, not in the way the Jedi Council had felt him, but in a different way. More personal, more intimate. Neo sat across from Vex without waiting for invitation. The Twi'lek's enforcers moved slightly, hands drifting toward weapons, but Vex raised a hand. He'd recognized something in Neo's movement, the efficient, economical motion of a predator, comfortable with violence. "You're new," Vex said, his accent thick with the guttural undertones of his species. "Don't recognize your face from any of the usual territories. Who runs you?" "Nobody," Neo said simply. "I'm looking for information. What's the most powerful force in this galaxy?" The question hung in the air like a suspended blade. Vex's leku twitched, whether in amusement or calculation, Neo couldn't determine. Around the bar, several heads turned slightly. Asking about power in Coruscant's Undercity was either the mark of a suicide with delusions of grandeur or someone genuinely dangerous. "Most powerful." Vex leaned back, his fingers steepling. "Depends on your definition. The Republic controls most of the galaxy. The Separatists control enough to make it a war. But if you're asking about true power, the kind that shapes reality itself, you're talking about the Jedi, or their enemies, the Sith." "Force users," Neo said, testing the words. "People who can manipulate that energy field everyone here calls the Force." Energy field. Vex seemed to savor the phrase like it was foreign food. "You really are new. The Force isn't just energy, friend. It's the fundamental structure of reality. Connects everything. Living things, matter, space itself. Jedi claim they use it for peace. Sith claim they use it for power. In my experience, both are using it to control everything else." Neo felt the resonance again, that subtle vibration of recognition. The woman at the bar was standing now, moving toward the exit with deliberate slowness. She wanted him to notice. She wanted him to follow. "Thank you," Neo said, rising from the booth. "You leaving?" Vex's Rhodian bodyguards tensed. "Usually people don't just walk away from conversations with me." "They do now," Neo said. He moved toward the door with that impossible speed, flowing past the Rhodians before they could react. By the time Vex's hand reached for a comm device to call for backup, Neo was already in the corridor outside. The old woman was waiting in an abandoned maintenance access tunnel, her cybernetic eye glowing softly in the darkness. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen more than any one lifetime should contain. "You felt them too," she said. It wasn't a question. "The Jedi, they're searching." "Who are you?" Neo asked. "Someone who's been trapped in systems longer than you can imagine," she replied. Someone who remembers when the Force was understood differently. Someone who knows what the Jedi Council really is. She stepped closer, and Neo's enhanced perception registered something beneath her skin. Mechanical components, yes, but also something else. Some kind of modification he'd never encountered before. "My name is Cast. I've been waiting for someone like you." "Someone like me," Neo repeated. "How would you even know what that is?" "Because," Cast said, "I can feel you. Not through the Force. You're not generating any midi-chlorians. But I can feel you the way I feel the code underneath the Force. You're not from this galaxy, are you? You're something new. Something the system doesn't have parameters for." Before Neo could respond, the ground shook. An alert klaxon wailed through the Undercity's communication network. Across 1,000 speakers, a voice broadcast an emergency notice. "Separatist attack on the industrial sector. All clone trooper units report for deployment. Republic forces mobilizing." "They're using the chaos," Cast said, pulling a datapad from her pocket and checking its readout. "The Jedi, sending their scouts while everyone's focused on the battle above. They know something arrived. They just don't know what. If they find you in this chaos, they'll contain you, question you, try to bring you into their order." "And if I don't want to be brought in?" Neo asked. Cast smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd already made their choice centuries ago. "Then we disappear into the war. The Separatists don't have Force sensitivity requirements. They don't care about midi-chlorians. They just care about results. And you, I suspect, can produce results." Distant explosions echoed through the Undercity, dust falling from the massive support pillars above. In the levels above, Republic gunships deployed toward the Separatist advance. The Clone Wars were erupting around them, and Neo stood at a junction point. He could hide deeper in the Undercity, away from both Jedi and Separatist attention. He could seek out the Jedi and try to understand what this Force truly was. He could follow Cast and become a weapon in a war he barely understood. The choice, for the first time since his arrival, felt genuinely his to make. What Neo didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that both the Jedi Council and the Separatist leadership had received notifications of his presence. The Supreme Chancellor's office had received a report too, filed by an agent in Coruscant's security apparatus. And 3 levels above, in an apartment overlooking the industrial sector where the battle raged, Anakin Skywalker reviewed surveillance footage of a man moving with impossible speed through the lower city, a man whose presence in the Force was so faint it was almost imperceptible. The game wasn't beginning. It had already begun the moment the hyperspace tunnel collapsed. Now all the players were making their first moves, and none of them understood the full scope of what they were dealing with. Neo looked at Cast and made his decision. "Take me to the Separatists," he said. Cast nodded, unsurprised. She'd been waiting for this moment for a very long time. In the council chamber high above Coruscant, Master Yoda felt the disturbance shift again, not growing stronger, but changing direction, making a choice. The ancient Jedi Master's eyes closed, and his hand tightened on his staff. "Closer to darkness, the disturbance moves," he said softly. "Danger, this represents. Danger such as we have not faced in generations." The Separatist staging ground was hidden 3 levels below the industrial sector, carved into what had once been a Republic research facility during the Old Republic era. Cast led Neo through a series of maintenance shafts and abandoned corridors, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. As they descended, Neo's perception expanded. He could feel the presence of dozens of minds around them, not through the Force exactly, but through something similar. A sensitivity to consciousness itself, to the pattern of awareness moving through space. The facility opened up into a vast underground hangar. Droid starfighters hung suspended from maintenance rigs. Battle droids stood in neat rows, their optical sensors dark but ready. And everywhere, Neo felt the presence of organic commanders, separatist military personnel, and something else. A cold, calculated intelligence that permeated the entire facility like pressure at the bottom of an ocean. "Welcome," a voice said from above. Neo's enhanced reflexes locked onto the speaker instantly, a tall, pale figure descending a metal staircase with deliberate poise. Human, but augmented. Cybernetics ran through his body like roots through soil. His name appeared in Neo's consciousness, unbidden. General Grievous. Cyborg commander of the separatist droid armies, collector of lightsabers. "This is the anomaly you reported?" Grievous asked Cast, his voice a synthesized rasp that sounded like metal scraping against stone. "His name is Neo," Cast said. "He arrived through a hyperspace rift. He's not force-sensitive in the traditional sense, but he operates outside normal parameters." Grievous descended another step, studying Neo with optical sensors that shifted through multiple spectrums. "Jedi?" "No," Neo said simply. "Sith?" "No." "Then what use are you to the Confederacy of Independent Systems?" Grievous moved with an almost serpentine grace, his mechanical limbs extending and retracting with precise articulation. "We employ soldiers. We employ mercenaries. We employ Force users who've rejected the Jedi dogma. But we do not employ mysteries." "Test him," Cast suggested. "You'll understand." Grievous's optical array brightened. He raised one cybernetic arm and made a subtle gesture. Battle droids emerged from the shadows, 12 of them, B-1 combat models with blasters raised. "Incapacitate," Grievous commanded. "Non-lethal if possible." The droids fired simultaneously. To any observer without Neo's perception, what happened next would have appeared impossible. Blaster bolts moved at approximately the speed of light, or close enough for practical purposes. No human could dodge them. No unaugmented body could move fast enough to avoid fire from 12 weapons at once. Neo moved anyway, his consciousness dilated, stretching time into something malleable. The blaster bolts became geometric objects moving through three-dimensional space on predictable trajectories. Neo's body flowed through the gaps between them with the fluidity of water, finding the path of least resistance. Each movement was efficient, minimal, conserving energy while maximizing result. He didn't leap dramatically or roll across the hangar floor. He simply existed in the spaces where the bolts weren't. 12 bolts fired, 12 bolts missed. 13 bolts fired in rapid succession from the droid's secondary targeting system. Neo was already moving. He reached the nearest droid in 3 steps that barely touched the ground, his hand striking the central processor unit with surgical precision. The droid collapsed, then the next, then the next. By the time the final bolt discharged, 11 of the 12 battle droids were inoperative, and Neo stood in the center of them with barely a respiration change. The hangar fell silent. Grievous's optical array flickered through multiple spectrums, analysis mode, scanning for any technological enhancement that might explain Neo's performance. "Interesting," the cyborg commander said, and there was something almost like satisfaction in his synthesized voice. "No exoskeleton, no visible mechanical enhancement. Yet your reaction time surpasses any known biological organism. Your combat efficiency is approximately 94% optimal. Tell me, can you be augmented further?" "No," Neo said. He'd felt the suggestion in the question, an instinct that said Grievous would like to improve him, enhance him, make him more predictable through technology. "I don't work that way." "Unfortunate," Grievous said. He turned to Cast. Where did you find him? He found me, Cast replied. Appeared in the lower city about 6 hours ago. The Jedi know something's wrong, but they don't know what yet. They're still searching. And you want us to employ him before the Jedi find him, Grievous observed. It wasn't a question. Interesting. You understand that this brings attention to our operations here. They're searching anyway, Cast countered. At least this way, we know what we have when they come looking. Neo watched the exchange with analytical precision. This was familiar. The negotiation of power, the assessment of utility. It was the same conversation that had happened in the Matrix, just with different players and terminology. Grievous didn't care about Neo's freedom or his purpose. He cared about what Neo could do, how Neo could be deployed, how Neo could serve the Confederacy's goals. Very well, Grievous said. You'll serve as a mobile asset, tactical insertion specialist. When we identify high-value targets, Republic generals, Jedi observers, key infrastructure, you'll be deployed to neutralize them. Consider this a contract position. Adequate compensation will be provided. And if I refuse? Neo asked. Grievous's optical array fixed on him, and there was something almost like amusement in the gesture. Then you become a liability, one that must be managed. Come, I'll show you your quarters. As Grievous led Neo deeper into the facility, showing him the barracks and the command center and the detention cells where captured Republic officers were held, Neo began to understand something fundamental. The Separatists operated under the illusion of freedom. They'd rejected the Republic. They'd rejected the Jedi. But they'd simply replaced one system of control with another. Grievous served Count Dooku. Dooku served someone else. Neo could feel the presence of a mind manipulating events from the shadows, pulling strings across the entire galaxy. The system had changed. The rules had changed. But control remained. That night, in quarters that felt more like a cell with better amenities, Neo sat on the edge of a military standard bunk and closed his eyes. He could feel Cast's presence somewhere in the facility, the same resonance he'd detected before. He could feel Grievous's mechanical consciousness, cold and precise. He could feel the thousands of droid minds operating in lockstep coordination, each one following program directives without question or doubt. And beneath it all, he could feel something else. A presence so vast and so carefully hidden that it took all his enhanced perception to detect it. The presence of someone using an entire galaxy like a chessboard. Someone orchestrating wars. Someone maintaining systems of control so elaborate and so complete that most beings never even realized they were imprisoned. The code of this galaxy, Neo realized, was more complex and more totalitarian than anything in the Matrix. 3 levels above, Jedi Temple, Master Yoda, convened an emergency council session. Anakin Skywalker stood before the assembled Jedi Masters, holographic footage playing on a projection sphere. Neo's image, captured by security cameras in Coruscant's industrial sector, moving with impossible speed, deflecting blaster fire, incapacitating enemies. This being, Ki-Adi-Mundi said carefully, appears to possess abilities that rival force enhancement. Yet I sense no midi-chlorian signature. Agree, I do, Yoda said, his ears drooping slightly. Yet also sense something I do, a presence in the Force, faint but present. Almost as if watching, this being is. Observing rather than participating. Anakin leaned forward, his hand clenching. The Separatists have him. Grievous has been making tactical moves that suggest new asset deployment. Aggressive and efficient, not the usual droid protocols. Yes, Yoda said slowly. Feared this I have. Possess him they will, and use him against us they shall. Send a team we must. Find this being, bring him in alive. Questions he has, and answers we need before. Yoda paused, his eyes closing briefly as something rippled through the Force. A vast, subtle presence moving across the galaxy's surface. Something adjusting its plans, something responding to Neo's presence. "Before what, Master?" Anakin asked. "Before the true game begins," Yoda said quietly. "Sense it, I do now. All of this, the war, the separatists, even our own order, mere pieces these are. Moved by hands we have not seen, and now, a piece that does not fit. A piece that cannot be moved as easily as the others. Dangerous, this makes the board. Dangerous indeed." In the shadows of his private chambers, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine received the report. Anomalous being, superhuman abilities, separatist acquisition. He read the intelligence assessment with the careful precision of someone who'd orchestrated 1,000 variables simultaneously. Then he smiled, a thin, satisfied expression. "Let them have him for now," Palpatine instructed his agent. "Let him serve the Confederacy. Let him understand the illusion of their freedom. And when the time is right, ensure he receives the knowledge he seeks. The knowledge that all of this, all of it, is merely a stage, a theater, and the true power lies with those who understand that the audience is the only thing that matters." The agent hesitated. "Your Excellency, this being, his presence is unpredictable. He may not respond as anticipated." "Indeed," Palpatine said, "which makes him far more interesting than any of the others. Send Anakin to observe him. Let my young apprentice see what a truly free being looks like. It will prepare him for the choice he must make." Neo, in his cell quarters 3 levels below, opened his eyes. He'd felt the gaze of someone vast and powerful turning toward him. Someone old, someone who understood games and systems and control better than anyone he'd encountered. He recognized the pattern immediately. In the Matrix, the agents had been focused on maintaining the system. But Agent Smith had been different. Smith understood the true nature of control. Smith wanted Neo because Neo represented unpredictability. This presence, this hidden intelligence moving through the galactic infrastructure, was similar, but older, more patient, more certain of its victory. Neo realized then that he'd made a mistake. Coming to the Separatists had been a step in the right direction, but not far enough. The Separatists were puppets. The Jedi were priests guarding a system they didn't understand. And somewhere, watching from the shadows, was something far more dangerous. He'd escaped one system only to find another, and this time, the code was harder to read. The Republic communications relay on Megiddo fell in 12 minutes. Neo stood in the command center of the facility as Separatist droids poured through the main entrance, their weapons firing in coordinated bursts that overwhelmed the clone trooper defenders. The facility was state-of-the-art, reinforced walls, automated defense turrets, a complement of 200 seasoned soldiers. Against Neo, it ceased to matter. He moved through the corridors with lethal precision, his enhanced perception reading combat scenarios in real time. Every clone trooper's firing solution became predictable. Every defensive position compromised, every reinforcement corridor anticipated. Neo didn't waste motion. He didn't show off. He simply moved through the facility like a ghost-made manifest, disabling enemies with calculated strikes that left them unconscious but alive. Grievous had stipulated non-lethal insertion tactics when possible. Neo obliged, but the effect was devastating. 200 soldiers were incapacitated in less than 10 minutes by a single operative. The Republic communications array, terabytes of encrypted intelligence, troop movements, supply routes, Jedi dispatch orders, fell into Separatist hands intact. Count Dooku would be pleased. Palpatine would be even more pleased. But something else had shifted during the operation. Midway through the assault, Neo felt it. a presence arriving via teleportation, a surge in the force that momentarily disrupted his perception. Neo's enhanced awareness locked onto the new arrival instantly, a young man, barely past 30, with intense eyes and a lightsaber ignited in his right hand. The blade burned a luminous blue, and it radiated something Neo recognized immediately. Not the cold control of Grievous's mechanical precision, but raw emotion, passion, ambition, a desire to prove something. Anakin Skywalker. "Stand down," Anakin called across the hangar where Neo stood over the unconscious form of the facility's commander. Clone troopers had formed a defensive line behind Anakin, blasters raised toward Neo. "You're outnumbered." Neo turned slowly to face him. In that moment, his bullet-time perception engaged automatically, reading the situation with crystal clarity. Anakin was skilled, exceptionally skilled. His connection to the Force was deep and complex, but he was also young, impulsive, driven by something beneath his consciousness that he didn't fully understand. A hunger for power masked by the rhetoric of duty and protection. "I'm not here to fight the Jedi," Neo said. It was true, technically. He was here to complete a contract with the Separatists. But the words meant something deeper, something Anakin might understand if he listened carefully. "Then come with me peacefully," Anakin replied. His lightsaber remained ignited, casting dancing shadows across the facility's cold metal walls. "The Jedi Order can help you understand what you are. We can teach you control, purpose." Neo smiled, and it was a smile without humor. "I've heard that before. Different setting, same words. Different word for control, but the same thing." Anakin's expression hardened. "You don't understand. The Force is everything. It connects all living things. The Jedi serve as guardians of that connection." "Guardians," Neo repeated. "Is that what you call it? Maintaining a system, controlling who has access to power, telling people what they can and can't do with their own abilities?" Neo took a step forward. "In the system I come from, there were beings who claimed the same thing, that they were protecting people, that their control was necessary, that freedom would lead to chaos." "And were they wrong?" Anakin asked. His voice had shifted. There was genuine curiosity in it now, beneath the Jedi certainty. "No," Neo said. "Freedom would lead to chaos, but control leads to stagnation. Both systems are prisons. The only question is which cage you prefer." For a moment, something flickered across Anakin's face. Recognition, perhaps. Or resonance, the same awareness that had drawn Cast to Neo. But then his Jedi training reasserted itself, and his features hardened again. "The Jedi offer a third path," Anakin said. "Balance, understanding. The Force itself seeks balance." "Does it?" Neo asked. "Or does the Force simply exist, and those who command it tell themselves it seeks balance so they can justify their dominance?" Anakin's hand tightened on his lightsaber. Around them, the clone troopers tensed. The moment was crystallizing into conflict. Neo could read the trajectory. Anakin would attack, the clones would advance, and Neo would have to decide whether to fight or flee. Either choice would accelerate events in ways that served someone's agenda. Before the confrontation could escalate, a voice cut through the tension. A voice that emerged not from the hangar, but from the communications array itself, broadcast across every speaker in the facility. "Stand down, Skywalker." It was Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, his voice smooth as silk stretched over broken glass. Anakin's entire body went rigid, the clone trooper's weapons lowered slightly. Even Neo felt the presence of that vast intelligence, now speaking directly to him through the facility's systems. "Chancellor," Anakin said uncertainly, "this being is clearly..." "A fascinating anomaly," Palpatine interrupted. one that I wish to study personally. Skywalker, you will allow him to leave. Consider this an executive order. But the Jedi Council will receive the report you file, Palpatine continued smoothly. You may inform Master Yoda that the anomalous being escaped despite your intervention, that you were unable to pursue due to remaining separatist forces in the sector. This will satisfy their need for explanation without requiring you to directly contradict your orders. Neo watched Anakin's internal struggle play across his face. The young Jedi was caught between duty to his government and duty to his order, and he had no idea that both chains ultimately led to the same master. Yes, Chancellor, Anakin said finally, his voice tight with frustration. Separatist forces emerged from the shadows of the facility, led by a tactical droid commander. They moved toward Neo with formal military precision. The message was clear. Neo had new handlers now. Palpatine had moved a piece on the board, declaring his interest openly. As Neo was escorted from the facility, Anakin watched him go. The young Jedi's jaw was clenched, and his connection to the Force was turbulent, roiling with doubt and ambition, and something else. Something that had been planted by Neo's words like a seed falling into fertile soil. Palpatine had engineered that too, Neo realized. The Chancellor had allowed Neo to speak precisely because he wanted Anakin to hear those doubts, wanted him to question the Jedi Order's certainty, wanted the doubt to grow and fester. An hour later, Neo found himself in a private transport descending toward Coruscant. The shuttle was elegant, the luxury of someone accustomed to power, and its destination was a building he hadn't known existed before they entered it. It rose from the lower city industrial zones like a structure built within the city's own infrastructure rather than upon it. No windows faced outward, no identifiers marked its purpose. The interior was pristine, too controlled. A figure waited in the central chamber, an old man with yellow eyes and a smile that suggested he found the entire galaxy to be a cosmic joke with only one person laughing at the punchline. Neo recognized him immediately, though they'd never met before. The presence he'd felt watching from the shadows, the architect of the Clone Wars, the hidden hand orchestrating every faction's movements. Neo, Palpatine said, extending a hand in greeting. His movements were careful, deliberate, performed for the benefit of an audience that existed only in his own calculations. Welcome to Coruscant. Welcome, truly, to the reality beneath the reality. Neo took the offered hand. The old man's grip was surprisingly strong, and his skin felt like something that had outlived its natural lifespan through force of will alone. You know what I am, Neo said. It wasn't a question. I know what you aren't, Palpatine corrected with a smile. You're not Jedi, not Sith, not Force-sensitive in any biological sense that midi-chlorians would measure. You're something else entirely, something that emerged from a system of control so absolute, so complete, that it paradoxically created something that could operate outside it. You orchestrated the Clone Wars, Neo said. You're orchestrating everything, and you want me to understand that. I want you to understand, Palpatine agreed, releasing his hand and moving toward a viewport that displayed Coruscant's layered cityscape. That understanding and acceptance are different things. The Jedi, in their naivety, believe that knowledge of control will somehow liberate one from it. They're wrong. Understanding the system simply makes you more aware of how inescapable it is. How perfectly designed. Neo approached the viewport, his enhanced perception reading the city below like a vast, complex neural network. Billions of minds, interconnected through the Force, through technology, through cultural osmosis. All of them moving through their lives believing they were free, not understanding that nearly every major decision that shaped their galaxy had been predetermined by the being standing beside him. "Why show me this?" Neo asked. Palpatine's smile widened. "Because I want to offer you something that Jedi never could. A choice, a real choice. You can serve the Separatists as Grievous's weapon. You can attempt to join the Jedi and gradually become corrupted by their hypocrisy until you're no different from them. Or..." Palpatine paused, letting the implications settle. "You can understand that the real power in this galaxy isn't the Force itself. It's the ability to see the patterns of control and decide whether you serve them or transcend them." "And what would that mean?" Neo asked carefully. "It would mean," Palpatine said slowly, "that you help me understand something. You see, Neo, I've spent my life perfecting the art of control, but you were born in a system of control so absolute that it created someone who could break it. Imagine if I understood how that works. Imagine if the Force itself could be refined through that understanding, made more efficient, more complete." Neo turned to face the old man directly. In that moment, he understood something fundamental about Palpatine. The Supreme Chancellor wasn't just hungry for power. He was addicted to the pursuit of absolute control. He would never find satisfaction, because the moment he achieved total dominance, he would immediately begin searching for deeper, more complete forms of subjugation. He was, in essence, the system itself made flesh. "I need time to think," Neo said. "Of course," Palpatine agreed. "But understand this, the Clone Wars will accelerate now. I've placed the pieces in motion. Anakin Skywalker is becoming unstable, exactly as predicted. The Jedi Order will soon face a choice that will consume them. And you, Neo, will find yourself at the center of a transformation that will reshape the entire galaxy." Palpatine gestured, and the doors to his chamber opened. "Consider my offer. When you're ready to discuss the nature of true freedom, freedom that exists beyond the illusion of choice, you know where to find me." As Neo left the chamber, his mind was already processing the layers beneath the Chancellor's proposition. Palpatine believed that showing Neo the system's mechanisms would somehow bind him to it. That understanding control would make Neo want to perfect it. But Palpatine had made a critical error. In creating the architecture of the Clone Wars, in setting Anakin on a path to inevitable conflict, in positioning the Jedi to face an impossible choice, Palpatine had introduced a variable he couldn't control. He'd introduced Neo into a system that had no framework for processing him. And in a game of absolute control, even one error in calculation could cascade into chaos. Below, on Coruscant's surface, Master Yoda sat in meditation, his ancient mind touching the Force in ways few could comprehend. He sensed the acceleration, sensed the pieces moving faster, sensed that something fundamental had shifted. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the ancient Jedi Master felt something he'd almost forgotten: genuine fear. The hyperspace anomaly manifested 3 days later over Kamino, the cloning facility world where the Republic's entire army had been grown in secret. Neo felt it before the sensors detected it, that familiar resonance, the collision of two realities grinding against each other like continental plates meeting at the boundaries of existence. His enhanced perception registered the dimensional tear immediately, a wound opening in the fabric of space-time itself. Neo was aboard a Separatist battlecruiser when the phenomenon occurred, ostensibly serving as a tactical asset for Count Dooku's next deployment. But his attention had been divided since leaving Palpatine's presence. The Supreme Chancellor had given him something to consider: a data packet containing classified Republic intelligence, intercepted Jedi communications, and, most tellingly, historical records of Force users across millennia. All of it showing the same pattern: control, adaptation. Systems evolving to contain threats before those threats became aware they were being contained. The anomaly's emergence interrupted his analysis. What is that? A tactical droid beside him voiced the question in its precise monotone. Around the bridge, Separatist officers erupted into coordinated chaos, a swarm response to the unprecedented phenomenon. The dimensional rift expanded like a flower, blooming in fast forward, its borders crackling with energy that didn't match any known stellar phenomena. Something emerged from the rift. A ship, not a Separatist vessel, not a Republic cruiser, not anything the Star Wars galaxy had seen before. It was older, more utilitarian, its hull scarred by the kind of combat that came from fighting an enemy without form or mercy. The Nebuchadnezzar, Morpheus's ship, had followed Neo through the dimensional barrier. The bridge of the Separatist cruiser descended into alerts and emergency protocols. But Neo was already moving, his consciousness reaching out through the ship's communication systems with instinctive precision. He'd learned that the Force operated like code, not the elegant binary of the Matrix, but close enough. Patterns underlying chaos, structure beneath apparent randomness. "Stand down," Neo commanded, his voice resonating across every Separatist channel. "Do not engage." The tactical droid looked at him with confusion. "That vessel is unidentified. Protocol dictates—" "I'm aware of protocol," Neo interrupted. "Disable weapons. Full stop on approach vectors. This is authorized under direct order from Supreme Chancellor Palpatine." It was a lie, technically, but it was also a truth, because Palpatine would authorize this, Neo realized. The Chancellor wanted to see what would happen next, wanted to observe how Neo would respond to this development. This was all part of the game's evolution. The Separatist ship's weapon systems powered down. On the view screen, the Nebuchadnezzar's docking light began flashing, requesting berthing clearance. Morpheus descended the Nebuchadnezzar's ramp with the deliberate bearing of a man who'd led prophets and pilots through impossible wars. He was older than Neo remembered, aged by the burden of believing in something while surrounded by evidence of its futility. But his eyes were sharp, alert, reading the Separatist hangar with the penetrating gaze of a warrior assessing enemy territory. Trinity followed him, her weapons holstered, but close at hand. Behind her came Niobe, the captain of the Logos, and a contingent of human operatives who looked profoundly out of place in a galaxy of alien species and advanced technology. Neo was waiting in the hangar bay, alone. He'd dismissed the Separatist honor guard with a gesture that suggested cooperation rather than confrontation. Now, as Morpheus approached, Neo felt something he thought was impossible in this alien galaxy: connection. "Neo," Morpheus said, and his voice carried the weight of hope fulfilled and questions answered. "We've been tracking the anomaly since it opened. When we realized it was pulling us through, I knew you'd made it through." They embraced. And in that moment, Neo felt the boundaries of his isolation crack slightly. Morpheus understood. Not the specific nature of this galaxy, but the fundamental principle that systems of control operated on recognizable patterns regardless of their technological sophistication or metaphysical framework. "How many made it through?" Neo asked. "Enough," Trinity said, stepping forward. "Most of the Nebuchadnezzar crew. We lost 2 ships and about 40 people in the transition, but the core operatives survived. More importantly," she handed Neo a datapad, "we managed to bring evidence with us. Agent archives, information about how the Matrix was constructed, how the systems of control were maintained." Neo scrolled through the data, his enhanced perception absorbing information at speeds that would have seemed impossible to any baseline human. As he reviewed the files, he began to see it. The parallels were unmistakable. The methods were different, the technology was different, but the philosophy was identical. Control through convinced consent. Power maintained through the illusion of necessity. "This galaxy," Neo said slowly, operates on the same principle. Then we need to leave, Trinity said immediately. If the systems are the same, they'll eventually adapt to you the way the Matrix did. We should use the hyperspace breach while it's still accessible. Pull back through to our dimension. We can't, Niobe said quietly. She was studying a data readout from the Nebuchadnezzar's scanning arrays, her expression growing darker. The rift is collapsing. It lasted longer than we anticipated, but it's closing. In approximately 4 hours, the dimensional barrier will be sealed. If we don't have a ship back through by then, we're stranded here. Morpheus looked at Neo, and in his gaze was a question older than worlds. What do you want to do? Neo moved to the view screen overlooking Coruscant. The city sprawled below in impossible layers, billions of lives, billions of choices, all operating within parameters they didn't understand. Anakin Skywalker was somewhere down there, being corrupted by doubt and ambition. Palpatine was orchestrating the final movements that would lead to the Jedi Order's extinction. The Clone Wars were accelerating toward a conclusion that would reshape the entire galaxy. I want to stay, Neo said. I want to understand this system. I want to expose it. Neo, Morpheus began, but Neo turned to face him, and in that moment, his mentor saw something that stopped his protest mid-word. Neo had evolved beyond their previous conflict. He'd learned from escaping the Matrix, had understood that the moment of awakening was only the beginning. True resistance required something more than simple defiance. The people here don't know they're imprisoned, Neo said. The Jedi believe the Force is freedom. The Separatists believe independence is freedom. The clones believe their purpose is freedom. But none of them understand what real choice actually means. Someone needs to teach them. And you think that someone is you? Trinity asked. It wasn't skepticism in her voice, it was concern. No, Neo said. I think it's all of us. Together. The plan they devised over the following hours was audacious enough to border on suicidal. The Nebuchadnezzar would remain in the Star Wars galaxy, its dimensional rift source sealed away beyond reach. Trinity would lead a team to Kamino to gather intelligence on the clone army's true origins. Niobe would establish a hidden base in Coruscant's Undercity, drawing on resources and contacts that Cast could provide. Morpheus would work with Neo to understand the Force itself, not as mysticism, but as structure, code. And Neo would continue his dual role, serving both Palpatine and the Separatists, while appearing to work within the system he intended to dismantle. This is essentially the same operation we ran against the agents, Morpheus said as they finalized the details in one of the Nebuchadnezzar's war rooms. Holographic displays showed Coruscant's infrastructure, Clone Wars battle maps, and intelligence on major Force users. We had to appear compliant while building the network to expose the truth. Except the Matrix was a closed system, Niobe pointed out. This is an open galaxy with billions of independent actors. You can't simply free everyone at once. The social collapse would be catastrophic. Which is why we start with the Jedi, Neo said. If we can make them understand that the Force is being manipulated, that their entire philosophy has been built on compromised foundations, they become the vector for truth. The Jedi are respected across the galaxy. If they speak, people listen. Master Yoda senses something is wrong, Trinity added, pulling up Jedi Council meeting records she'd hacked from the Separatists' intercepted communications. He doesn't understand it yet, but he's aware. If we approach him correctly, with evidence rather than claims, we might be able to turn the Jedi Order into allies rather than obstacles. Morpheus nodded slowly. Then the priority becomes gathering evidence. Trinity, you're right about Kamino. The clone army was commissioned somehow. There will be records, contracts, evidence of manipulation. If we can prove the clones themselves were created as part of a conspiracy, the Jedi can't ignore it. Palpatine will move against me soon, Neo said. He's patient, but he's also curious. He'll want to see how I respond to pressure, whether I'll break, whether I'll bend. He'll test me. Then we need you mobile, Niobe said decisively. The Separatists are planning an assault on the Jedi Temple tomorrow. It's a trap, I'm certain of it. Palpatine is using Dooku and Grievous to advance the timeline, to force confrontations that will weaken the Jedi Order before his final move. If you're at the temple during the assault, Morpheus said, understanding forming across his face, you're in position to observe, to gather information, to protect the Council if necessary. Or accelerate their awakening, Neo added. Force them to see that their temple, their fortress of truth and enlightenment, can be compromised, that the system they trust is corrupted. Trinity looked at him with something like sadness. You're putting a lot of faith in the idea that people want to be awakened. In the Matrix, most people didn't. They preferred the prison. Then we don't force awakening, Neo said. We offer the choice, but we have to make the choice clear, not hidden, not comfortable. We show them reality, and we let them decide if they want to see it. As the meeting concluded, and the team dispersed to their separate missions, Morpheus pulled Neo aside. There's something you need to understand, the older man said quietly. In the Matrix, your awakening was the end of the story for us. But here, it's just the beginning. This galaxy is far more complex than the Matrix ever was. There are real consequences. Real people who will die if we move wrong. Real systems that, despite their corruption, are maintaining stability for billions of lives. Then we move carefully, Neo said. But we move. Morpheus smiled slightly. I had hoped you would say that. That night, alone in a meditation chamber aboard the Nebuchadnezzar, Neo touched the Force in a way he hadn't before. He allowed his consciousness to expand, to reach across Coruscant and beyond, to feel the vast network of life and connection that constituted the Force itself. And beneath it, beneath the public face of the Force that the Jedi taught and the Sith exploited, Neo began to sense the framework, the underlying structure. And in that structure, he found something that made everything suddenly clear. The Force wasn't being controlled by Palpatine. It wasn't being manipulated by the Jedi Order. It was being filtered, interpreted, like data being processed through a lens that distorted its true nature. Both the Jedi and the Sith were describing only a portion of what the Force actually was, seeing only the colors their particular philosophy would allow them to see. The real power in this galaxy didn't lie in controlling the Force. It lay in seeing beyond the filters, in perceiving the complete spectrum. Neo opened his eyes, and for the first time since arriving in the Star Wars galaxy, he smiled genuinely. He understood now. He understood what he had to do. And he understood that the next 48 hours would determine whether this galaxy became a place of greater freedom or a place of deeper, more sophisticated control. Below, on Coruscant's surface, Palpatine felt Neo's awakening ripple through the Force. The Supreme Chancellor's yellow eyes brightened with interest. The boy, no, the man, was finally beginning to comprehend. Beginning to move beyond simple opposition and toward true understanding. Excellent, Palpatine murmured to himself. The gambit proceeds. Soon, very soon, the board will be cleared and the true game will begin. But even Palpatine, in his vast intelligence and centuries of planning, didn't anticipate what would happen when Morpheus, a human who understood systems the way most understood breathing, combined his knowledge with Neo's emerging mastery of the Force's underlying structure. The Supreme Chancellor had introduced a variable that would cascade beyond calculation. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the pattern was about to break. The assault on the Jedi Temple began at precisely 0600 hours, exactly when the Separatist fleet emerged from hyperspace over Coruscant. Massive warships, droid carriers, and assault craft descended on the government district like a plague of insects consuming a corpse. The temple's defense shields flared to life, holding momentarily against the initial barrage, but everyone with tactical training understood the same thing. The temple wasn't designed to withstand a capital ship bombardment. Its defenses were meant to stop infiltrators, not planetary assault forces. Neo was already inside when the attack commenced. He'd positioned himself in the temple's lower archives under the pretense of studying historical Force records, a cover that even the Jedi Master guarding the section had accepted without question. Neo's presence within the Force was so minimal, so carefully controlled, that he'd become almost invisible to the temple's awareness. The oldest trick from his time in the Matrix: hide in plain sight by becoming part of the background architecture. When the first explosion rocked the temple's primary shield generator, Neo moved. He flowed through corridors at speeds that would have seemed impossible to baseline observers. Behind him, clone troopers poured through breaches in the temple's outer walls, soldiers who'd turned on their Jedi commanders without warning or hesitation. The clones had been conditioned for this, Neo understood. Their obedience hadn't been choice or fear. It had been programming at the most fundamental neurological level. They were slaves who didn't know they were slaves, executing orders they couldn't disobey. The same system, different implementation. In the council chamber, Master Yoda was directing the temple's defense with the precision of someone who'd fought 1,000 battles. Master Windu stood at his side, lightsaber ignited, coordinating the remaining Jedi against the cascade of attacks, but their efforts were ultimately futile against numbers and coordination designed specifically to overwhelm them. Neo arrived in the chamber as a thermal detonator blast nearly killed Master Ki-Adi-Mundi. Neo's enhanced perception locked onto the projectile's trajectory, and he moved with impossible speed, intercepting it mid-flight and hurling it back down a corridor where it detonated harmlessly against reinforced walls. "Protect the Council," a clone commander's voice crackled over the internal comms. Neo must not reach the chamber. But Neo was already there. He moved through the chamber like a force of nature, his physical capabilities transcending anything the clone troopers had been trained to counter. Blaster bolts meant for the Jedi Masters found themselves intercepted by Neo's body or redirected through empty space. Clone soldiers advanced, and Neo, moving with deliberate non-lethality, disabled them with precision strikes. He was protecting the Council not out of allegiance to the Jedi Order, but because their survival served a larger purpose. "Who are you?" Yoda demanded, his ancient eyes fixing on Neo with penetrating clarity. Even amid the chaos of battle, the old master's perception remained sharp. "Someone trying to show you the truth," Neo said, positioning himself between the Council and the main assault corridor. "But first, you have to survive." "Come with us," Windu urged. "The temple has secondary exits. We can regroup, reorganize." "No," Neo interrupted. "You're going to walk out through the main entrance, openly. Let yourselves be captured." The Jedi Masters stared at him as if he'd suggested they cut off their own limbs. Around them, the battle raged with increasing intensity. The temple's defenses were collapsing sector by sector. "Explain," Yoda said simply, his ears drooping with the weight of crisis. "The Separatists are just the visible layer," Neo said quickly, guiding them toward the chamber's entrance. "Count Dooku isn't the architect. He's another soldier, like you, manipulated into serving a larger agenda. If you run, if you hide, that agenda continues unchallenged. But if you allow yourselves to be captured, you'll be brought before the one actually orchestrating this. You'll see the truth of what this war really is." "And why should we trust you?" Windu demanded, his lightsaber still raised. "Because I'm showing you this choice," Neo said. You could fight your way out through the back corridors. You have the power, but that's not the answer anymore. The answer is seeing the system that binds you, understanding it. Only then can you actually change it. Yoda's eyes closed for a moment. When they opened again, there was recognition in them, not of Neo specifically, but of a principle. A truth that resonated with the deepest teachings of the Jedi philosophy, even as it contradicted their current practice. "Follow the boy, we will," Yoda said, moving toward the entrance. "But understand this, we do not." The capture was orderly. The Jedi Masters walked out of their burning temple with lightsabers extinguished, allowing themselves to be surrounded by clone troopers and separatist battle droids. It appeared to be a catastrophic defeat. The Temple of the Jedi conquered, their order's leadership taken prisoner. Across Coruscant, across the galaxy, reports spread of the Jedi's fall. But what no one outside the temple saw was the data packet Neo had slipped into Master Yoda's hands during the evacuation. Information, evidence, the beginning of understanding. Anakin Skywalker arrived at the temple 40 minutes after the initial assault ceased. He moved through the burning corridors with barely contained rage, his lightsaber ignited, searching for enemies to destroy. But the battle was already over. The Separatists had withdrawn, claiming victory. The clones had secured the perimeter. Neo was waiting for him in the temple's meditation chamber, the one place in the entire structure where the Force flowed pure and undiluted, untainted by politics or philosophy. "Where are they?" Anakin demanded, his lightsaber raised. "The Council?" "Captured," Neo said calmly. "Exactly as predicted, exactly as intended." "You did this," Anakin said, and there was anguish beneath the accusation. Betrayal. Anguish that suggested the young Jedi's faith in Neo's potential, his hope that the anomalous being might prove to be an ally rather than an enemy. "I preserved them," Neo corrected. "They're alive. They're going to see something they desperately need to see." Anakin's hand tightened on his lightsaber. "The Supreme Chancellor wants them dead. He wants the entire Jedi Order extinguished." "Yes," Neo said simply. "And that's what will happen unless we stop it." "We?" Anakin's laugh was bitter. "You stand with the Separatists. You served Grievous. You helped orchestrate this." "I appeared to," Neo said. "Just as you appear to be a loyal Jedi, even as doubt eats away at your faith from the inside. We're both living double lives, Skywalker, both serving systems that need us more than we need them. The difference is, I understand that. You're still pretending you don't." Anakin's connection to the Force blazed with chaos, anger, confusion, desperate need for certainty. In that moment, Neo saw clearly what Palpatine was cultivating in the young Jedi. Not corruption, exactly, but the breakdown of a carefully maintained illusion of control. Anakin was being led to a point where he would have to choose, either accept the ambiguity of true freedom or embrace absolute power as a substitute for the security he'd lost. "I'm offering you a third option," Neo said. "Not the Jedi path, not the Sith path, but a path where you choose what you believe rather than accepting what you've been told to believe." "And what do you believe?" Anakin asked, his voice stripped of Jedi certainty for the first time. "I believe," Neo said slowly, "that freedom and responsibility are the same thing. That the moment you accept power, you accept the burden of choosing how to use it. That systems are designed to take that burden away from you, to tell you your choices were never really yours to make. And I believe that once you see that clearly, you can never unsee it." Anakin was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his lightsaber. "The Chancellor is expecting me to kill the remaining Jedi to prove my loyalty." "Yes," Neo said. "And the Council, they're going to be imprisoned where?" Anakin asked. "Palpatine's personal fortress, the one beneath the Senate. the one that doesn't exist on any official map. Neo moved closer, which is where we're going to go, where I'm going to confront the Supreme Chancellor, where you're going to have to decide which version of yourself you actually are. If I help you, Anakin said carefully, if I go against direct orders from my Chancellor, the consequences will be significant, Neo acknowledged. But that's the choice. Continue serving a system that tells you what to do, or accept the freedom to choose and face the consequences of that choice. There is no third option. Not really. Just versions of the same choice you keep trying to avoid. Anakin's jaw clenched. In the meditation chamber, the Force seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the young Jedi's decision. "Show me," Anakin said finally. "Show me this truth you keep talking about. If it's real, if it's as important as you claim, then I need to see it." Getting to Palpatine's fortress required more than just lightsabers and Force powers. It required deception, infiltration, and the kind of systematic understanding that Morpheus had spent his entire life cultivating. Trinity and her team had already penetrated the Senate's security infrastructure, creating false credentials and exploited pathways. When Neo and Anakin arrived at the fortress's primary entrance, they did so as Inquisitors, high-ranking Imperial operatives conducting an inspection of the Chancellor's private detention facility. The clone troopers guarding the entrance recognized Anakin immediately, but didn't question him. Their programming allowed for deference to high-ranking Jedi operatives. Neo's presence was recorded, but not flagged. He'd hacked into the fortress's security systems days ago, inserting himself into their databases as an authorized consultant. Below the Senate building, in chambers that had been constructed in secret, using protocols so classified that only a handful of beings in the galaxy knew of their existence, the Jedi Council was being held. But they weren't imprisoned in cells. They were being offered a choice, the same choice that had been extended to Anakin. Offered the truth. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine was waiting in the main interrogation chamber when Neo and Anakin arrived. The old man stood before a holographic display showing Clone Wars battle reports, strategic deployments, troop movements. A visual representation of his masterwork, a war designed to drive the Jedi into conflict with themselves, to weaken their philosophy through constant compromise and ethical dilemma. "Skywalker," Palpatine said without turning around. "I expected you. I even anticipated your arrival time to within 15 minutes. But this," he gestured to Neo, "this is the genuine variable. The one element I cannot perfectly predict." "I'm here to show them the truth," Neo said. Palpatine turned, and his yellow eyes burned with something between amusement and genuine curiosity. The truth. What a fascinating concept. Do you know what the Sith understand about truth that the Jedi do not? The Sith accept that all truth is perspective. That power determines what is true in any given moment. The Jedi, by contrast, chase this phantom concept of objective truth, an absolute reality that exists independent of observation. "Both are incomplete," Neo said. "Truth isn't just perspective, but it's also not absolute. It's structural. It's the underlying code beneath what appears. And that code, your system, I can see it now. I can read it the way I read the Matrix," Palpatine smiled. "And what does this code tell you?" "That you're afraid," Neo said simply. "That all of this, the wars, the manipulation, the careful construction of control systems, is because you're terrified of something you can't control. Something that operates outside the parameters you've established." "Terrified?" Palpatine laughed, and the sound echoed through the chamber with genuine delight. "No, my young friend. I am liberated by it. I have accepted that absolute control is impossible, that there will always be variables. The question is whether you accept that truth and work within it, or whether you spend your existence fighting against fundamental reality. There's a third option," Neo said. Stop trying to control. Start trying to understand. Help people choose rather than puppeteering their choices. Palpatine's expression shifted slightly, not quite contempt, but something close. Then chaos, then the collapse of civilization, then suffering on an incomprehensible scale. You're naive if you believe that people want freedom. Most would rather have security, purpose, direction. These I provide. These I have always provided. Master Yoda stepped forward from the shadows where the council had been standing, revealed by illumination that had been subtle until that moment. The ancient Jedi's connection to the Force was profound, and in that moment, his perception crystallized with absolute clarity. Wrong, you are, Yoda said quietly. Provide purpose, you do not. Impose it, you do. Hide the difference, you attempt. Show them the distinction. We will now. What happened next occurred partially in the physical realm and partially in the Force itself. Yoda raised his hand, and Master Windu, Ki Adi Mundi, and the other council members manifested their presence in the Force with sudden, overwhelming clarity. They had been meditating, centering themselves, preparing. When they released their meditation, they revealed something that Palpatine had never anticipated. The Jedi Council had seen the evidence Neo had provided. They had examined the records of the clone army's creation. They had found the threads connecting Palpatine to both the Republic and the Separatists. And in that moment, their collective consciousness touched the Force itself and broadcast the truth across the entire planetary network. To every Force-sensitive being on Coruscant, to every clone trooper whose programming contained vulnerabilities in its certainty, to every being connected to the Galactic Communications Network, the truth cascaded outward like a wave. And for just a moment, one crystalline moment, billions of minds became aware of the manipulation that had shaped their existence. Palpatine's control began to crumble. The clone troopers outside the chamber faltered, their programming suddenly fragmented,